They were all laughing until my name and salary flashed on the screen. He said it was a mistake, but when HR walked in, everyone stopped breathing because the real proof was mine. My name is Dana. I'm 33 years old. It started with a ping, not a scream, not a fight, just a single sharp notification sound that sliced through the quiet hum of the conference room like a blade cutting through still air. We were halfway into our monthly team meeting, projected timelines glowing faintly against beige walls, the smell of burnt coffee rising from mugs scattered around the table. The AC vent above buzzed softly, too cold for comfort, and I could hear the faint scrape of someone's shoe tapping beneath the desk. It was a Friday morning in Nashville, the kind that looked harmless from the outside, sunlight pressing against the blinds, emails piling up quietly in inboxes, a routine that felt predictable. Until that sound. I was taking notes the way I always did, quietly, meticulously, my handwriting small and neat, rows of bullet points that no one ever read but me. Blake, our manager, was pacing near the screen, his hands stuffed into his pockets, his tie slightly undone like he wanted us to think he was easygoing, approachable. He spoke in that steady, performative rhythm that managers perfect over years of pretending to care about team alignment. I'd stopped listening months ago. His words had become background noise like the buzz of the projector or the hum of the fluorescent lights. What mattered in that room wasn't what was said. It was what wasn't. Then came another ping, and another. The rhythm broke, the air shifted. A subtle wave of confusion passed through the room. Heads lifted, screens blinked awake. I heard the faint squeak of Serena's chair as she leaned back. Tyler from design tilted his head toward the monitor. For a split second, everyone went still, waiting for Blake to continue, but he didn't. The group chat on our office messaging system, projected on the shared screen for everyone to see, had just displayed a new message. From Blake, a forwarded email. Subject line: salary adjustment, Dana L. I didn't breathe. My heart didn't pound. It just stopped moving for a second, suspended between disbelief and clarity. On the screen, beneath the subject line, were my numbers, my full name, my private HR correspondence. Every word of that thread, the details of my raise request, the negotiation, the exact figure. The room didn't erupt. It fell silent. That heavy, dangerous kind of silence that makes every second sound like a heartbeat. I caught Tyler's glance first. He tried not to react, but his eyebrows lifted slightly, and that was enough. Serena's lips parted, just a small, involuntary expression, but her eyes said everything. She knew what this meant. Everyone did. Blake stuttered mid-sentence. His confident tone broke. He fumbled with the mouse, trying to close the chat window, his voice cracking as he muttered something about technical issues. His laughter, too forced, echoed awkwardly against the walls. But the damage was done. The message had landed. He had just forwarded my confidential salary email to the entire department. Accidentally, maybe, but not innocently, because I knew Blake. I knew the way he liked control, the way he enjoyed quiet humiliation disguised as mistakes. I'd seen him do it before. Subtle digs, veiled jokes, small public slips that weren't really slips at all. That morning, I'd worn my soft blue cardigan, the one my sister gave me for Christmas, the one that made me feel calm. The fabric brushed against my wrist as I set down my pen. I remember thinking how it felt like armor, light but steady. My chest rose slowly, my pulse steadied. I didn't flinch. He wanted me embarrassed. He wanted the whispers by the vending machine. He wanted my silence to mean defeat, but he had no idea what I'd been saving. I opened my laptop without a word. The familiar chime of my inbox opening sounded louder than the rest of the room. My cursor moved with quiet precision. A few clicks brought me to a folder buried deep in my email tree. One I had labeled months ago. Red tape. Inside were threads Blake thought were gone. Screenshots he assumed I'd deleted. PDFs of Slack exchanges, meeting minutes, and policy forms he'd asked me to tweak for the sake of efficiency. I remembered the first one I saved, an email where he'd asked me to trim one of our new hires hours without reporting it to HR. Another where he bragged about adjusting pay bands for people who wouldn't notice. His phrase, his arrogance. Each file in that folder told a story. Each one was a seed of truth waiting for the right soil. I felt my fingers hover above the keyboard. For a moment, I thought of saying something aloud, calling him out, right there, in front of everyone. But no, that would give him a spectacle, and Blake thrived on spectacle. I chose silence instead, the kind that sharpens everything around it. I began composing an email. My subject line was short. Forwarded in error? My recipients: HR manager, senior director, compliance officer, CC. Myself. Attachments: 5 files, no commentary, no accusation, just evidence. My cursor hovered over send, then click. It was done. The moment after felt weightless. My hands rested on the keyboard, still steady. Blake was still speaking, still pretending nothing had happened. His words blurred together into meaningless noise about deadlines and productivity. I could see the faint sheen of sweat beginning to form at his temple, the kind that comes from panic hidden under politeness. Outside the window, I caught a glimpse of sunlight flickering against the parking lot cars. A bird landed on the sill. Everything felt strangely still, like the world had paused, waiting. Then the door opened. Amanda, our HR manager, stepped in. Crisp suit, composed posture, a manila folder tucked neatly under her arm. She stood at the back of the room, just long enough for the tension to thicken. No one spoke. Blake kept talking for another 5 seconds, maybe 6. Then he noticed the shift. The silence wasn't the kind that comes from boredom anymore. It was the kind that comes before impact. Amanda's eyes met his. She said his name. Blake. Her voice was calm. Even. We need a word. Now. He froze. His face twitched with confusion. Or maybe recognition. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. Amanda lifted the manila folder slightly, just enough for everyone to see the printed email inside, the same email I had just sent. The color left his face. Tyler looked down. Serena leaned back, folding her arms. Someone coughed softly, a sound that felt like thunder. Blake tried to recover. I don't understand what this is about. Amanda didn't let him finish. We'll talk privately, she said. Bring your laptop. Her tone wasn't angry. It was official, final, the kind of tone that ends conversations. He pushed back his chair. The sound of metal scraping tile filled the room, sharp and echoing. He stood slowly, eyes darting from the projector to Amanda to the team. His hand trembled slightly as he picked up his laptop. And as he passed me, he didn't look up. Not once. I sat perfectly still. The air smelled faintly of burnt coffee again. The hum of the AC returned to its normal rhythm. I placed my fingers back on the keyboard. My screen blinked with the reflection of the empty spot where he'd been standing. And I kept typing. I typed as if nothing had happened, as if my entire world hadn't just shifted in one email. But beneath that calm, I felt it. The quiet click of justice beginning to turn. That meeting ended 15 minutes later. No one said much. Chairs rolled back, footsteps echoed down the hall, and the projector light dimmed to black. Serena gave me a look before leaving, something between disbelief and respect. Tyler nodded once, almost like he understood. When I finally stood, I could still feel the pulse of adrenaline in my chest. Not shaky, not afraid, just steady. Controlled. In the hallway, Amanda's voice carried faintly from the HR office. Blake's was lower, defensive, trying to explain. A door closed, then another. I walked to my desk, shut my laptop, and placed my blue cardigan neatly over my chair. I could see my reflection in the dark screen. Calm eyes, steady breath. I realized then that he had tried to humiliate me in public, and in doing so, he had written his own ending. That ping, that single careless click, had triggered a chain reaction he couldn't stop, and I was done being the quiet one. I didn't even look up when the door closed behind them. The soft thud of it was the only sound left, sealing the tension like a lid on a boiling, Pot. My fingers kept moving across the keyboard. Click. Pause. Click. Click. It wasn't effort anymore. It was reflex. After years in that office, typing had become something my body did on its own, the same way breathing happens when your mind is somewhere else entirely. The rest of the team stayed frozen in their chairs. No one shifted, no one coughed. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, the only witness to the silence that followed. They didn't know what to say. No awkward joke from Tyler this time. No nervous small talk about deadlines or weekend plans. Even Serena, who could fill silence faster than anyone, just stared at her hands. They didn't have to ask what had happened. They'd seen enough. And more importantly, they knew I knew. I finished typing a follow-up note to HR, each word landing with deliberate precision. I asked that any formal inquiry include an audit of all payroll discrepancies within our department over the last 12 months. I chose that word, discrepancies, on purpose. It was professional, clinical, impossible to argue with. No emotion, no accusation, just a quiet command disguised as a request. I CC'd the same director again. And legal. The click of send felt heavier this time, like the sound of a door locking behind a truth that could no longer be ignored. When I closed my laptop, the silver lid reflected the overhead light like a clean sheet of glass. I stood. The chair creaked softly, and every head in the room turned toward me. Serena's mouth opened just slightly. Her lips parted like she was about to say my name, or maybe apologize, or maybe ask if I was okay. But I didn't give her the chance. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't ruin the silence I'd earned. I walked past the projector, its light flickering faintly against the wall, still showing the ghost of the last slide, and out of the room. The hallway stretched long and sterile, lined with glass partitions and muted posters about teamwork and innovation. The carpet was that dull corporate blue-gray that never looked clean, no matter how many times it was vacuumed. My heels sank softly into it as I walked, each step steady, deliberate. The hum of the ceiling vents followed me, a low mechanical whisper that seemed almost nervous. I'd spent nearly 5 years in that building, 5 years of early mornings, budget freezes, and whispered promises of promotions that never arrived. 5 years of reorganizations that reshuffled names on spreadsheets but never accountability. I'd watched new hires, half my experience, half my effort, earn salaries I'd had to negotiate for like a favor. But that day, I wasn't asking for fairness anymore. I was demanding consequence. The break room was empty when I stepped in. The air smelled faintly of old coffee and something metallic from the vending machine. I poured what was left of the pot into a chipped mug, the liquid dark and bitter. Steam curled against my fingers, the warmth grounding me in a day that no longer felt real. I sat by the window, the one that overlooked the parking lot, and that lonely, half-dead tree they never watered. Its branches rattled in the breeze like bones, reaching for sunlight that never quite touched them. It was almost noon. The light outside had shifted, brighter now, throwing long, golden rectangles across the linoleum floor. They stretched toward my shoes like brush strokes of paint over something cracked and forgotten. I thought about my dad, how he used to say, "Paper trails save good people from bad decisions." He said it whenever he filled out forms or kept old receipts in a shoebox no one else understood. Back then, I rolled my eyes. It sounded paranoid. But now it sounded like prophecy. The hum of the refrigerator filled the room. The clock above the sink ticked too loudly. I let the quiet sit. Then my phone buzzed. A small, sharp vibration on the table beside the mug. A message from Mia. From accounting. Mia. Holy crap! Did you just... Was that you? Me. Yes. Mia. You okay? Me. Better than I've been in a long time. The 3 dots blinked for a moment, then disappeared. I imagined her sitting at her desk 2 floors up, glancing over her shoulder to make sure no one saw her texting me. Mia wasn't reckless. If she was reaching out, it meant the whispers had already started. I took another sip of the coffee. It tasted terrible, but it gave my hands something to do. A few minutes later, footsteps approached, slow, measured. Amanda appeared in the doorway. Her presence filled the room without sound. She didn't smile, didn't sit, just met my eyes and gave a single deliberate nod. "Thank you," she said. "We'll handle the rest from here." That was all. 7 words. But they hit harder than any speech could have. Because those words meant belief. They meant I wasn't the problem anymore. They meant I wasn't alone. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. Amanda turned and left as quietly as she'd come, her heels clicking down the hallway until the sound disappeared. I stayed there for another minute, watching the light shift again, softer now, like the day itself had exhaled. Then I went back to my desk. The office looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. Something in the air had changed. Lighter, like dust after a storm. When I opened my calendar, I saw it. Blake's name, erased from every upcoming meeting. Each entry now marked TBD. A small thing, but seeing those 3 letters felt like watching his authority evaporate in real time. By 4 o'clock, his office door was closed, locked. A shadow moved inside once or twice, maybe someone collecting his things. At 4:30, I saw a man from IT wheel out his monitor. The cable dangled behind it like a tail, dragging softly against the carpet. He didn't look around, didn't speak, just unplugged, rolled, and left. By 5, the email arrived. Subject line: Personnel update. Effective immediately, Blake R. is no longer with the company. Interim leadership will be announced shortly. No apology, no explanation. Just the consequence. I stared at the message for a long time, rereading the sterile phrasing until the words blurred. Then I closed my laptop and began to pack my things. The office was hushed. Phones rang somewhere far off, muffled by glass walls. A printer sputtered once, then went silent. People pretended to keep working, but I could feel their eyes flick toward me in brief, quiet intervals. Not in pity, not even curiosity. Something closer to respect. Because I hadn't shouted, I hadn't argued, I hadn't made a scene. I'd simply raised the standard. I slipped my cardigan over my shoulders again. The fabric smelled faintly of coffee and resolve. Outside, the city was bathed in that honey-colored light that only shows up right before dusk. Cars glided through the parking lot, their windshields catching the glow. When the elevator doors closed, I caught my reflection in the steel panel. Tired eyes, steady posture, a calm I didn't have that morning. Justice, I realized, doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it walks in quietly with a folder under its arm and says only 7 words. That weekend, I didn't leave the house, not once. The world outside kept moving. Cars passing, kids shouting in the distance, the faint sound of lawnmowers chewing through Saturday air. But inside my walls, time felt different. Slower. Quieter. I didn't go out for brunch like I usually did. Didn't scroll through restaurant menus or meet friends for overpriced mimosas and laughter that never quite reached my chest. I didn't even open LinkedIn, even though I knew my feed would already be full of speculation, half-truths and coded posts about unexpected leadership changes and new opportunities. The group chat pinged a few times, little messages wrapped in forced casualness. "Crazy week, huh? Wild stuff in the office. You okay?" I stared at the screen, the 3 dots blinking like a heartbeat, then let the phone go dark. I didn't reply. Instead, I stayed home. Made soup the way my mother taught me. Slowly, with too much garlic and not enough patience. I stood by the stove watching the steam rise, letting it fog the kitchen window until the outside world disappeared behind it. Then I curled up on the couch with a blanket, a half-read book on the table beside me, and the windows cracked just enough to let the Tennessee wind move through the room. The air that drifted in carried the faint scent of rain-soaked leaves and asphalt cooling after a storm. Curtains swayed gently. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. A door slammed. And then, stillness. It was the kind of silence you only notice when you've been surrounded by noise for too long. The silence of your own space finally breathing with you. I listened to the creak of the old floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional rustle of wind against the blinds. I listened until the sound of my own heartbeat felt like company, and I thought about the word vindication. Not the cinematic kind, not the triumphant music swelling under slow-motion victory, but the quieter kind, the one that doesn't need an audience, the one that settles over you like the first calm after a storm. Vindication doesn't shout, it exhales. I remembered the first time I realized something was wrong with Blake. It wasn't a headline moment. There wasn't a big confrontation or a single smoking gun. It was smaller, sharper. The kind of thing that starts as a feeling and then grows roots in your gut. It was a Zoom call last summer. He'd been going over performance goals, the usual corporate monologue about growth metrics and team synergy. The window light behind him turned his office into a halo he didn't deserve. Someone, me, had just presented an idea that got good feedback from the director. And then Blake said it, with that smirk he wore when he wanted to make something sound like a joke. "She's getting a little too ambitious, isn't she?" He didn't say it about a man. He said it about me. And I knew. In that instant, before the awkward laughter in the call, before the subtle shifting of faces on the screen, I knew exactly what kind of manager he was. The kind who didn't mentor, he measured, the kind who clipped wings the moment they started to lift too high. So I stopped pretending. And I started saving things, not out of paranoia, out of preservation. Every email that felt off, every message where his tone sharpened just enough to sting, every harmless joke that left a bruise on morale. I didn't confront him, didn't argue, didn't give him a reason to corner me. I just documented, quietly, carefully. Like pressing flowers in a book, you don't need them until the day you do. That Monday, I arrived 10 minutes early. The city was just waking up, traffic lights changing against an empty street, a mist hanging low over the river. I parked in my usual spot, grabbed my bag, and stood for a second in the cool air before walking in. When my badge beeped against the reader, it lit green. Still active, still valid. My name still sat neatly on the org chart, my email still worked, but something had shifted in the building's rhythm. I could feel it the way you feel static before a storm. People looked up when I walked in, made eye contact, held the elevator door open instead of letting it close. There was something different in their faces, an acknowledgement, subtle but unmistakable. Not fear, not pity, recognition. For years, I'd been invisible in that office, the dependable one, the quiet one, the person whose ideas others repeated in louder voices until they became theirs. But that morning, people saw me, because I had done what no one else dared to do. Not explode, not gossip, not quit. I'd exposed him, not with noise, but with facts. After lunch, Amanda stopped by my desk. Her presence was calm as always, that steady kind of authority that didn't need to announce itself. She wore her usual blazer, hair pinned back, expression neutral. But there was something softer around the edges, a kind of quiet approval that didn't need to be said aloud. "Just letting you know," she said, her tone even. "The exec team reviewed your documentation. They're opening a full audit." I nodded once. "Okay." "You might be asked to answer a few follow-ups," she continued, "but you're not under scrutiny. You're the reason this came to light." Her words landed heavier than I expected. I felt a slow warmth build in my chest, but I didn't let it show. I just nodded again. Amanda reached into her folder, pulled out a thin stack of papers, and placed it gently on my desk. "This is yours now," she said. "Interim project lead, until further notice." For a second, I thought I'd misheard. The office noise blurred into the background, the click of keyboards, the faint murmur of conversation, the hum of the HVAC. I started, my voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't ask for that." "You didn't have to," she said simply. Then she smiled, a small, knowing curve of the lips, and walked away. I stared at the file, the words on the front. My name typed cleanly beneath the title. Leadership, not gifted, not granted, earned. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was something quieter, more grounded, like the world had finally tilted back into alignment. That afternoon, I ran my first meeting. Same room, same flickering projector light, same stale smell of coffee that had been reheated too many times, but everything felt different. When I spoke, no one interrupted. No one pretended to check their phone. Every eye stayed on me. The projector hummed above, casting a soft glow on the table. I flipped through slides, my own notes this time, and watched people nod, not performatively, but genuinely. The room felt balanced again. I didn't mention Blake, didn't bring up the incident, didn't even glance at the empty chair where he used to sit. I just did the job, better than he ever did. When the meeting ended, chairs scraped softly as people stood. A few offered quiet smiles. Tyler gave a small thumbs up on his way out. Serena lingered behind. She hesitated near the door, fingers brushing the edge of the whiteboard. The same woman who used to ignore me in the hallway. The one who once laughed at Blake's jokes when they were at my expense. She waited until the room was almost empty before she spoke. Her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "I just wanted to say," she began, "what you did, that was brave." I looked at her, met her eyes. "It wasn't brave," I said quietly. "It was necessary." She hesitated, then nodded. "Still," she said, "thanks for doing it. A lot of us were scared." Her words hung there for a moment, heavy but honest. I didn't reply, just nodded once and began shutting down the projector. Because I wasn't proud of what had happened, I was proud of what I hadn't allowed to continue. Vindication didn't feel like fire. It felt like air. It wasn't until the following week that I opened the envelope. The one Amanda had left neatly on the corner of my desk, half hidden under a stack of reports I hadn't touched since Monday. It had been sitting there for days, sealed, silent, patient. A plain white envelope with my name typed cleanly in the corner. No urgency mark, no label, just a weight I could feel every time I glanced at it. I'd walked past it all week, pretending not to notice it. I'd told myself I was too busy, but the truth was, I wasn't ready. The day I finally picked it up, the office was unusually quiet. Half the team was working from home. The hum of the air conditioning filled the empty spaces between keyboards and thoughts. My coffee sat cooling beside me, leaving a faint ring on the desk. I turned the envelope over in my hands. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind they used for formal HR correspondence. It felt heavier than it should. I slid a finger under the seal, hesitating for a second before tearing it open. Inside was a letter, folded once, clean, precise. The tone was official, written in that careful, polite language companies use to sound human while protecting themselves. Standard phrases about performance, contributions, and organizational alignment. But one line stopped me. "As a result of your diligence and transparency, we are adjusting your compensation to reflect the responsibilities you have carried and continue to carry within the department." I stared at that sentence until the words blurred together. Not because of what it meant financially, but because of what it meant symbolically. Someone had seen it, someone had named it, someone had acknowledged that my work had value beyond silence. I held the letter until my fingers smudged the ink. My coffee had gone cold, the steam long gone, leaving the faint smell of roasted beans and burnt sugar. Outside my window, the afternoon sun was shifting across the floor, creeping in thin lines toward my shoes. It wasn't about the money. It never was. It was about recognition. For once, the system that had trained me to stay small was looking me in the eye. I folded the letter carefully, creasing it along the same line it had been folded on before. Then I tucked it into the side of my desk drawer, right next to my old red tape folder, the one that had started everything. When I closed the drawer, I felt something in my chest uncoil. A long-held breath I hadn't realized I was still holding. It wasn't that everything was suddenly fixed. Far from it. But I understood something now. There are two kinds of people in corporate. Hallways. Those who play by the written rules and those who learn to write their own. And for the first time, I knew which one I was. That Friday afternoon, the building buzzed with its usual end-of-week fatigue. Someone had brought cupcakes for a birthday. The smell of frosting drifted faintly down the hallway. Printers hummed, chairs rolled, and somewhere in the distance, I heard laughter that didn't feel awkward for once. I was heading toward the elevator when I heard a voice behind me. "Hey, Dana?" It was Mia from accounting. She was standing halfway down the hall, her phone in hand, the case spinning nervously between her fingers. She looked hesitant, like she'd rehearsed something in her head a dozen times and still wasn't sure it was the right moment. I stopped. "Hey." She walked closer, lowering her voice. "Some of us were thinking," she said slowly, "about filing a joint statement, about Blake, what he did, what he tried to do." I blinked, caught off guard. "You don't need to file anything on my behalf," I said. Mia shook her head. Her voice softened. "It's not for you," she said. "It's for the next person." For a second, I didn't answer. I just watched her, the hallway light glinting off her glasses. There was something fragile but steady in her expression. Fear, maybe, but also resolve. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about the culture he had built, quietly, methodically, through offhand comments and subtle exclusions. A hierarchy made not of rules, but of hesitation. Mia looked down, fidgeting with her phone. "He made it normal," she said softly, "for people to be afraid of asking for what they earned." Her words lingered in the air like dust caught in sunlight. I didn't speak right away. I just nodded, letting the silence hold the weight of what she'd said. Then I answered, "If you need help writing it, I'll read over the draft." Mia smiled. Not a big smile, just a quiet, relieved one. The kind that says, "I thought I was alone, but I'm not." "Thanks," she said, and she meant it. That evening, I stayed later than usual. The sky outside turned from gold to gray, to the deep blue of approaching night. The office emptied slowly, voices fading, lights switching off one by one until only a handful of us remained. The hum of the exit signs filled the quiet. The air smelled faintly of toner and coffee grounds. I could hear the building itself settle, small creaks in the walls, the whisper of vents slowing down. I walked past Blake's old office on my way out. The door was open now. Inside, the shelves were bare, the desk wiped clean. The glass walls reflected the hallway light like water. It looked like he'd never existed there at all. But I remembered. Every word, every look, every small dismissal that had chipped away at people over the years. I remembered the meetings where he'd called someone too emotional for disagreeing with him. The times he'd rolled his eyes when I asked for clarification. The passive-aggressive scheduling, meetings at times he knew I couldn't attend, just to prove a point. He never yelled, never cursed. That's the thing about people like him. They don't leave bruises you can see. They leave silence. And for years, that silence had filled the building like smoke. It made people shrink, made them laugh at things they didn't find funny, made them doubt the tone of their own emails before hitting send. But not anymore. I stopped outside his empty office, hand resting lightly on the door frame. For a moment, I almost pitied him. The space looked so sterile now, stripped of the illusion of power. A ghost office. Then I turned away. In the break room, I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee. The machine hissed and gurgled, filling the room with that familiar bitterness. I took a sip. It tasted terrible, burnt, cardboard, slightly metallic. But it was mine now. My choice. My time. My office. I leaned against the counter, feeling the hum of the refrigerator against my back. The window above the sink showed the parking lot bathed in orange streetlight. A few cars still glowed under the lamps, but most were gone. It struck me how easy it would have been, that day in the meeting, to react differently, to scream, to cry, to let the humiliation swallow me whole. That would have been expected. That's what people like Blake count on, but I didn't give him that power. Real power isn't volume, it's precision. It's patience sharpened into strategy. It's knowing exactly when to act and when to wait. It's silence that cuts deeper than shouting ever could. I looked down at the coffee, the dark surface trembling slightly in my hand, and I smiled, not out of joy, but out of understanding. He'd used silence as a weapon. I'd turned it into a mirror. 2 weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. Not an email, not a memo buried in some inbox thread. A real envelope, cream-colored, thick, embossed with the company's seal in raised silver ink. It looked expensive, the kind of stationery reserved for formal announcements or boardroom invitations. My name sat neatly in the center, written in clean serif type, no title attached. Just Dana. I stood by my kitchen counter holding it, my fingers tracing the edge of the paper. For a second, I thought about leaving it unopened. The last time a letter had come from HR, it had pulled the floor out from under me. But this one felt different, heavier somehow, calmer. I tore it open carefully. Inside was a single sheet of thick weighted paper, no checks, no threats, no bureaucracy, just words, not a raise, not a warning, but a thank you. From the CEO himself. His handwriting was small and deliberate, the kind of penmanship people have when they think before they speak. He wrote, "In an environment where silence is often easier, you chose truth. Your integrity has strengthened the foundation of this organization." That line blurred as I read it. Not because I was crying, though I could have, but because it pulled me backward, all the way to that day. The day I sat in a freezing conference room as my salary became office gossip. The day I watched my dignity flash across a shared screen like entertainment. The day I felt my face burn while pretending not to care. I remembered the exact temperature of the air, the sharp hum of the projector, the taste of cold coffee on my tongue. I remembered the laughter that wasn't meant for me but still cut through me, and I remembered choosing not to react, to breathe, to wait, to respond instead of erupt. That choice, quiet, deliberate, surgical, had rewritten everything. That afternoon, after reading the letter, I drove back to the office. The parking lot was almost empty, late sunlight stretching long shadows across the asphalt. I parked in my usual spot, the one near the tree that was finally starting to bloom again after months of neglect. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and something new, fresh paint maybe, the kind of scent that says something old has been scrubbed away. I walked down the hallway I'd walked 1,000 times before, past framed motivational posters that now felt less ironic, past the same water cooler where I used to hear whispers that stopped when I entered the room, and I found myself standing once again outside the conference room. The same one. I turned the handle and stepped inside. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that holds echoes. The blinds were half open, letting afternoon light stripe across the long table. The projector hung from the ceiling, silent now. The screen was blank, glowing faintly from the reflection of sunlight. I ran my fingers along the edge of the table where I used to sit. Never at the front, always 2 seats from the corner, the place where people could forget you were there until they needed you to take notes. The wood was smooth, worn by elbows and coffee cups and years of repetition. It hit me then. I had never stood at the front of this room. Not until everything burned down. And yet, somehow, I'd managed to change the entire room anyway. The door opened softly behind me. Mia stepped in, holding a folder against her chest. She looked different now. Not scared, just tired. The kind of tired that comes after you've finally started sleeping again. She smiled faintly when she saw me. "They're sending out a new code of conduct next week," she said, "and training modules. Apparently, they're calling it the Dana Clause." I blinked. "You're joking." Mia sighed, half a laugh slipping through. "I wish I was." I couldn't help it. I laughed. A real one this time. Deep, unfiltered, the kind that shakes something loose inside you. The sound bounced off the walls and filled the empty room. Because, yeah, my story had started with embarrassment, but it didn't end there. It ended with accountability, with policy, with proof that truth leaves a longer echo than humiliation ever could. He was gone, and I was still here. Not as a survivor, as a standard. That evening, after Mia left, I stayed behind, not because anyone asked me to, not because I needed to prove something, but because I wanted to finish what I'd started long before any of this happened, a presentation, one I'd begun drafting months ago, before the chaos, back when I still believed good work could speak for itself. It was about systems, workflow integrity, Efficiency standards. The kind of topics Blake used to use as a cover. Empty words about streamlining and maximizing potential, without ever understanding what either meant. I sat at the long table, opened my laptop, and clicked through the slides one by one. Each one looked cleaner now, the data sharper, the layout tighter. It felt like closure, not in the emotional sense, but in the architectural one. I adjusted the alignment on the final slide, centered the text, changed the font weight until it felt right. Then I added one last line, simple, direct, unmistakable. He leaked my salary to shame me, but I leaked the truth to end him. I read it once, twice. It wasn't anger anymore. It was record keeping. I clicked save, closed the laptop, and turned off the lights. The projector's hum faded to silence. The room dimmed until all that remained was the faint reflection of streetlights through the blinds. As I walked out, I didn't look back. Not because I was trying to forget, but because I didn't need to see the room to know what I'd changed inside it. Some things don't need closure, they need consequence. And mine had arrived. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.